The autumn wind carried a different kind of sound that morning. Not the usual whisper through the dry Kansas grass. Not the distant call of prairie hawks hunting their breakfast. This was the sound that made horses jerk their heads up and birds scatter from their perches. This was the sound of pure terror ripping across the dawn. A scream. It tore through the air before the sun had finished climbing over the horizon. Sharp and desperate. The kind of scream that told anyone in earshot that someone was running for their life and had never known real danger until this exact second. But that story, the one about the scream, that comes later. First, you need to understand where it all began and where it's all leading. Kansas, 1918. Late autumn. The kind of day when the light turns golden early and the air smells like wood smoke and coming winter. An old man sat on the porch of a ranch house that had stood for 35 years, weathered by storms and strengthened by the hands that built it. Jack Brennan was 69 years old now, his hands gnarled from decades of working iron and rope. His face was lined deep with sun and wind, and the weight of memories that don't fade, even when you want them to. His grandson, Tommy, 12 years old and full of the restless energy boys have, sat on the top step, whittling a piece of cedar wood into something that might eventually look like a horse. The boy's knife slipped, and he cursed under his breath. Jack didn't reprimand him. Out here, a man learned to deal with frustration however he needed to, as long as he kept working. Tommy looked up at his grandfather, squinting against the afternoon sun. "Grandpa, how did you and Grandma Grace meet?" Jack's hands, which had been stroking the worn barrel of an old coal peacemaker hanging on the wall, went still. His eyes drifted out across the prairie, seeing something that wasn't there anymore. Or maybe, seeing something that was always there, if you knew how to look. "Boy," he said, his voice raspy, "some stories don't start with hello. They start with a scream." Tommy set down his whittling, sensing that something important was about to be said. Something that wouldn't be repeated if he didn't pay attention right now. Jack's voice dropped lower, taking on that quality it got when he was reaching back through the years, pulling up memories that still had weight to them, still had edges sharp enough to cut if you weren't careful. This was Kansas back in 1883. June. Early morning, just after dawn. I was 34 years old then, and I'd been alone on this ranch for 2 years. Your great-grandmother Emma had passed in 81. Tuberculosis, they said. I believed it then. I was wrong about that. But that part comes later. The old man's eyes focused on something far away, and the years seemed to fall from his face as he stepped back into that morning. Back into the moment when everything changed. Kansas, June 1883. Dawn breaking over the prairie. A younger Jack Brennan stood beside his Mustang gelding. A 6-year-old horse with the kind of endurance that made it worth more than gold out here. He tightened the cinch strap with practiced hands, checked the stirrups, adjusted the reins, did everything the way old Pete had taught him. The way you did when your life might depend on your horse not throwing you or running out of steam. When you needed it most, he was a man who knew the rhythms of the land, the silence of the wide open spaces. He thought he knew what to expect from the day. He was wrong. The morning was quiet, the air cool and crisp, but in the distance, over the rolling hills, a faint wisp of smoke curled into the sky where no smoke should be. It was a single, thin column, rising from the direction of the old Miller homestead, a place that had been abandoned for years. Jack frowned, a knot of unease tightening in his gut. Curiosity, sharpened by a deep-seated instinct for trouble, pulled at him. He swung himself up into the saddle, the leather creaking a familiar complaint. He wasn't a lawman, just a rancher trying to carve a life out of the unforgiving soil. But out here, you were your own law, and your neighbor's keeper, even if the neighbor was long gone. He nudged his horse into a steady trot, the animal's hooves thudding softly on the hard-packed earth. The smoke plume grew thicker as he drew closer, darker. It wasn't the gentle white of a campfire. It was the greasy black of something burning that was never meant to burn. And that's when he heard it, faint at first, carried on the breeze, a sound that didn't belong in the quiet symphony of the prairie dawn. It was a scream, sharp, desperate, and then cut off abruptly. Jack's blood ran cold. He spurred his horse into a gallop, the wind whipping at his face, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The tranquil morning had just been shattered, and he was riding straight into the heart of the chaos. He didn't know it yet, but this ride, this scream, this pillar of black smoke, it was the beginning of everything. The beginning of a story that would define the rest of his life. Thanks for watching. If you want to know what Jack found at the burning homestead, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. See you in the next one.